In this video, I'll be completing some work on the factory alarm system in a 1988 Porsche 944 to include an overview of the main components and functionality, alarm relay replacement, rekeying of the alarm switch to match the ignition key, and demonstrating the alarm control unit bypass procedure. Before getting into the repair work, let's take a look at the primary alarm system components for this 1988 model year. To activate the car alarm, there's a key-operated alarm switch located on the left body panel just behind the driver's side door. The alarm is activated with a key turn of 90 degrees to the right and deactivated with a turn of 90 degrees to the left. You'll only find this separate alarm locking switch on 1988 model years and earlier, as this functionality was later combined with the door lock in 1989 and beyond. But as a result of this earlier setup, the alarm switches used a different set of keys for the primary door lock and the ignition keys. There's also an alarm control unit located inside the cabin below the dash. On this late model 944, it's located behind the wooden kick panel in the passenger's footwell area near the DME computer, and on the earlier 944s, it's located behind the radio in the back of the center console. There's an alarm relay installed at the fuse panel in this car, which you won't find on the early cars before 1988. There's a hood contact switch attached to the firewall on the left side of the engine compartment, and an alarm horn positioned behind the battery on the right side of the engine compartment. To get started on the repair, there are a few things going on with this car. One, the previous owner bypassed the alarm control unit while troubleshooting a no-start condition, and the bypass jumpers were left in place. Two, the alarm relay is missing, so I've got a replacement unit to install at the fuse panel. And three, the keys to the alarm switch were lost somewhere along the line of previous ownership. Because the overall system functionality depends on the ability to activate and deactivate the alarm, I'm going to start with the alarm switch. With the keys being lost, one option here would have been to replace the alarm switch unit with a new one, as they were originally sold with a set of matching keys, but that part number is no longer in production, so we're left with the options of purchasing a pre-owned lock and key set, which typically goes for around $200 to $300. Or a locksmith may be able to take an impression of the existing lock to make a replacement key for it. So in order to keep costs down, what I'm going to do is see if the existing switch lock can be rekeyed or modified to accept the car's ignition key. Since we'll be disconnecting the alarm switch in a moment here, you'll first want to disconnect the negative lead from the main battery terminal to avoid triggering the alarm. In order to access the lock pins inside the cylinder, we'll need to remove the alarm switch from the car. If you remove the plastic cover for the door jamb air vent, you'll be able to see the backside of the switch with the wiring harness connected to it. This is where we'll ultimately disconnect the wiring and remove the switch from the car. The switch is mounted to the side of the car by a 24mm panel nut that resides under this plastic trim cover, so the first thing we'll need to do is gently pry the cover off. There's a ridge inside the cover that clips it into place, so you can use a small flathead screwdriver or a plastic spudger to pry it off. Just take care not to damage the paint surface here. This cover is a bit faded on the car, so I've picked up a replacement part for $6. And with the cover removed, you can go ahead and loosen and remove the mounting nut and washer, and then pull the switch through the side air vent and disconnect the wiring. Now that the switch is removed, we'll need to access the inside of the plastic housing by removing this back cover. These are glued in pretty tightly, so if you're not able to pry it off, the cover can be carefully cut off using a thin blade hacksaw or a small cutting tool. You'll also want to be as careful as you can with this step because the back cover will need to be re-glued to the housing upon reassembly. With the back cover removed, we can see a spring clip that will need to come off, along with a plastic switch arm in order to extract the lock cylinder. And once the spring clip is removed, the lock cylinder can be pulled straight out of the assembly. Here we can see the pin tabs along the top and bottom of the cylinder that would prevent the lock from being turned without its matching key. So at this point, you'll want to insert your ignition key into the lock, and in doing so, we can see that a number of the pins are drawn into the cylinder. If you have just a few tabs rising above the edge of the cylinder, those pins can simply be removed and you can move on to reassembling the lock. In this case, I had 6 remaining pins protruding from the cylinder, and those are the ones we'll need to modify or remove. So what you can do is swap around the position of those pins inside the lock, either forward to back or top to bottom to find a better combination, reinserting the key each time to check for a flush pin position. Just be careful not to lose the small springs inside the cylinder as you're working, and after making a few changes, I was able to get it down to just 2 pins sticking up. At this point, you can make note of those pins, remove the key, and then the affected pins can be pulled from the cylinder and discarded. With those pins removed, you can reinsert the key, and now we can see that there's nothing that would prevent this lock from being turned using this particular key, at which point the cylinder can be reinstalled into the housing, the switch arm and the spring clip can be replaced, and the back cover glued to the assembly with some adhesive. And finally, go ahead and install the switch in the reverse sequence. Attach the electrical connectors in the same position as before, push the switch through the body panel, tighten down the mounting nut, and apply the trim cover. With the alarm switch in working order, I'm now going to replace the missing alarm relay at the fuse panel. The original part number for this relay was 944-615-11301, which has since been superseded to 02 and then 03, but it may be listed under any of those variations. It's a multi-purpose relay used by Porsche across a number of models and applications, and may present as an alarm relay for the 1988 through 1990 944 model years, or an air conditioning relay for the 1982 to 1985 944 models. I picked this one up as new old stock on eBay for $40, but new ones can still be found for $60 to $70. Just check the assignment sticker under the fuse panel cover to verify any needed relays for your particular model year. In this case, the alarm relay sits at position G18, and all you need to do is place the pins in the correct orientation and then push the relay into the panel. Now that the relay has been replaced, I'm going to take a look at the alarm control unit and remove the bypass jumpers. To access it, what we need to do on this late model car is pull the carpet back in the passenger footwell area, remove the screws securing the wooden kick panel, and behind it, we'll find the DME computer and the alarm control unit, which is the smaller black plastic box with two electrical connectors. You can see here that I've got some additional orange wires going into the larger plastic connector. These are the bypass jumpers that were installed by the previous owner, and all I need to do is gently pull those wires out to restore functionality to the control unit. And now that I've got a working alarm switch, a new relay installed, and the bypass wires removed, we can go ahead and test the alarm system. Well, after activating and triggering the alarm, as you can probably hear, there's some relay clicking noises coming from the control module, but the horn isn't sounding. So it looks like we'll be exploring this a bit further. Since the switch is working and the control unit is receiving power, the next thing I'm going to do is check out the horn and its wiring. To get easier access, the 13mm mounting bolt can be removed from the bracket, and then the horn pulled away from the firewall and disconnected. After removing the horn and connecting it directly to the battery, there was no real response, and I could hear some pieces of metal rattling around inside when I shook it, so I went ahead and ordered a pre-owned alarm horn on eBay for $12. I also wanted to confirm that the replacement horn would be receiving power from these terminals when the alarm is triggered, and unfortunately a voltage check at this location confirmed that power was not coming through. So after checking the integrity of the wiring harness at both ends, as well as the seating of the plastic connectors to the control unit, I've determined there's likely an issue with the unit itself, but before ordering a new one for over $200 or a used one for between $40 and $50, I'm going to go ahead and open this one up and take a look inside for visual confirmation of any issues. The circuit board for the control unit is clipped into this plastic housing on the terminal side by some raised edges around the inside perimeter. In order to remove the internal components, you'll need a number of flat tools or screwdrivers to create some space around the edge and push the clips back while leveraging the terminal bracket out. And with a bit of careful work, the circuit board can be removed from the plastic housing without any damage. After inspecting the circuit board, I found the components on the top side to be in pretty good shape, but on the bottom of the board there was a broken and slightly burned circuit trace on this side here. The pathing for this circuit connects to the normally open contact for this relay coil on one side and the connection for the horn wiring on the other side. So what I'm thinking is that there was a short in the failing horn that overloaded the already aging circuit, and that caused it to fail. And as you can see here, I completed a small trace repair on the board using a short length of wire and some solder to bridge the gap. And after reassembling the control unit and installing it back into the car, I was able to get power to the horn terminals after triggering the alarm. So now it's time to connect and mount the replacement alarm horn and test the system. Since we're working with the alarm system, it's a good time to discuss the bypassing procedure that was previously mentioned. It's common for a faulty alarm control unit to cause a no-start condition on these cars, and in those cases, one troubleshooting step involves bypassing the alarm to see if the car will start, which is achieved by installing two jumpers into the larger electrical connector on the control module. To create the jumpers, all you need to do is cut two pieces of 14 gauge wire to a length of about 6 to 7 inches. Next, just strip the insulation from both ends of the wire, crimp on some male spade terminals to each side, and then they're ready to be installed. If we hold the control module with the smaller connector on the right side, the plug terminals for the larger connector are assigned numbers 1 through 4 from left to right along the top, and 5 through 8 from left to right along the bottom. Here we'll connect one jumper from pin 1 to pin 4, and the second jumper from pin 7 to pin 8. Just push the blade terminals far enough into each connection point so that they make contact with the metal connectors inside the plug. And with the jumpers properly installed, you can attempt to start the car to verify that the alarm bypass was successful. If the car still fails to start in this case, we can determine that the alarm control module is not what was causing the no start condition, and you can move on to troubleshooting the next component.